Hey, how's it going guys? Jack and Matt here with the Toasty Bros, and today we're going to be doing a $2,100 RTX 3080 monster of a gaming PC.
And today's video is brought to you by FSP and their beautiful hydro power supplies. We'll be talking more in depth about these power supplies later in today's video, but they challenged us to build a PC with the 3080 to showcase their awesome high-end power supplies for powering your next-gen gaming PC build. So how about we go ahead and talk more about this build and then dive right into it.
So the reason that we're calling this a monster build is, well, it's not the best one that you're going to get with a 3080. However, it's going to look really cool, especially inside of this Thermaltake case. But long story short, we got a 3800 XT with the RTX 3080. So overall performance-wise, this build should perform amazing and run every single game you could possibly throw at it in 2021.
So how about we go ahead and talk about each individual part and how it makes up this PC build.
So as I mentioned before, for the processor, we have the Ryzen 7 3800 XT. This is an 8-core 16-threaded processor, and well, the 3800X has been out for a while, but they basically made a new version called the XT that basically is an even higher clocked version of 3800X, and yeah, this thing boosts up to 4.7 gigahertz. I didn't remember that off the top of my head, but 4.7 gigahertz with 8-core 16-thread, this thing should be pretty crazy, and if I do say so myself, a monster. Now for the cooler, we decided to try something a little bit new. This is the Master Liquid ML240 mirror. So we actually have not used this one before, but it has kind of a cool mirror effect. Looks like something NZXT would probably do. Basically, we're gonna take these fans off because these are non-RGB fans, which I think is interesting that this CPU cooler comes with a nice RGB block, but then not RGB fans. There might be a version you can buy with the RGB fans. We purposely spent less on this one so that we could use these up here fans, which Matt will talk about when he talks about the case. But yeah, 240 mil is plenty for this 3000 XT, and we do have to use a cooler because this does not come with a CPU cooler. Most of the XT CPUs do not come with a cooler. Now for the motherboard, this is kind of the lacking part, I guess you could say, but this is an ASUS Prime B550M, a Wi-Fi board. And what I mean by lacking is, well, you could go X570, but B550 is, you know, a new motherboard. And honestly, for this build, because we're not gonna be actually doing any major overclocking or anything, this will be plenty. It does come with Wi-Fi. It does come with their Aurora Sync software and everything. So if we wanted to throw in some of this RGB stuff and have it be motherboard controlled, you could do that. Now for RAM, this is something that we normally don't do, but we actually got 4 sticks of DDR4. This is 32 gigs at 3200 megahertz. It's Trident Z RGB RAM because RGB is important. We really like G-Skill RAM with Ryzen stuff because, well, it just overclocks well. We've had problems with some of the other RAM DIMMs before, but another cool part is that we have quad channel. That means you're gonna get slightly better performance out of the box. And another cool thing is that this motherboard will support Ryzen 5000 series out of the box, and there is videos showing that having quad channel or dual rank RAM gets you increased performance on Ryzen 5000 series, so we're thinking ahead. Now for storage, we're doing something a little bit different. We're actually going with 2 different SSDs. So this right here is a PNY M.2. This is the Accelerate 500 gig Gen 3 SSD. We would recommend spending a little bit more and just going Gen 4, especially if you're gonna have 2 SSDs. But the reason we did this was because we normally would just do 1 boot drive and kind of leave it up to you guys to get extra storage. But we're like, hey, getting a 1 terabyte SSD right now, especially from Team Group, is incredibly cheap. It's under $100, 2.5-inch drive, very fast, and it's a good storage drive. You can even buy 2 terabyte ones, and you could spend less than $200 on storage and have 1.5 to 2 terabytes, so why not?
Now, for the graphics card, this is a monster of a graphics card. This is the RTX 3080. This is the MSI Gaming X, which comes with these beefy fans, nice RGB. It is super thick, and look at those power connectors, ladies and gentlemen. This thing does draw a lot of power, which is perfect for today's sponsor, FSP. We'll talk more about the power supply here in a second, but the 3080 is a card that not many of you can actually get, but if you can get your hands on it, or it's later in the year and you're watching this video and they're readily available, it most certainly is a great option for your next high-end gaming PC. And for those who don't know, this is actually the same one from the Linus Tech Support Challenge, so thank you, Linus. Now for today's video sponsor, FSP, this is the Hydro PTM Pro 1000 watt power supply. Now, the Hydro PTM series comes with wattages of 650 watts all the way up to 1200 watts. So depending on what build you're doing, there's definitely a wattage range for you. Now, NVIDIA does recommend a 750 watt power supply or greater, but FSP actually says go 850, so you have a little bit more headroom with upgrades in the future, and just so you're not pushing the absolute limits here. So if you do want to go with an 850 watt for this build, you most certainly could do that, and from our testing, it would work. But this 1000 watt power supply is going to give us a lot of headroom for upgrades in the future, and it comes with awesome build quality from FSP. All the Hydro PTM Pro power supplies come with an 80+ platinum rating, 10-year warranty. It does come with an awesome conformal coating to protect this power supply from high humidity, stains, and dust. It does rate for up to 95% humidity resistance. It also comes with a built-in eco switch, which allows the fan to kick on only after the power supply is under 30% load or more, making this a very quiet power supply for your next gaming PC. And it does come with full Japanese electrolytic capacitors. So if you are building this gaming PC or any other gaming PC in the future, we highly suggest you check out the FSP Hydro PTM Pro Series power supply. And yeah, we're absolutely happy to have this power supply. It is an absolute monster. And lastly, but certainly not least, this is the Thermaltake AHT200. Now this is a micro ATX case that kind of has a interesting vibe to it. This is one of those like enthusiast cases that we have yet to use before. Has a bunch of tempered glass side panels all the way around. I think it advertised having like 5 tempered glass side panels all the way around this thing. This is tempered glass, this is tempered glass, and it is really well built. The only downside is that this case is micro ATX, but it is a small form factor case in theory. So with that micro ATX motherboard, this thing is gonna fit nice and snug. That 3080 definitely is gonna fit. Hopefully I'm not wrong here. We've already tested this and we think it's gonna fit. So it's gonna be a very compact build with a lot of power. So how about we go ahead and put this thing together?
Alright guys, now that we have this epic RTX 3080 gaming PC all put together, let's talk about some benchmarks real quick. Now we decided to test this PC in a couple of titles, those being Cold War, Fortnite, Doom Eternal, and Shadow of the Tomb Raider. First up with Call of Duty Cold War, do keep in mind we tested this PC at 1080p, which yes, I know is kind of weird for an RTX 3080, we'll talk more about that here in a minute, but on Cold War on max settings, we got over 130 plus FPS. Now on max settings, you are using ultra anti-aliasing, which is very demanding, and 130 FPS is still no easy task for a game like Cold War. Now I did notice some weird things going on when playing some games like Cold War and Fortnite, where the GPU is not being maxed out even though I am running on ultra settings, and we're getting, well, somewhat lower FPS numbers. I do believe we're having some bottlenecking when it comes to the lower speed RAM at 3200 MHz and partially the 3800 XT. The RTX 3080 is definitely getting held back by certain parts in the system, and that was something I was kind of concerned about when building this PC. Yes, the 3800 XT is an awesome CPU, and the bottlenecking is not that bad, but you could certainly get more performance by getting something like a 5600X or some newer Intel CPU that would probably perform a little bit better in higher end games. So do keep that in mind. If you are going to go this route and build this PC, you might have some bottlenecking, which is not that bad. As you can see in the performance numbers in Cold War, you have a good gaming experience, and if you do step up to 1440p and 4K, you probably won't see that big of an FPS drop because the GPU will start being utilized a bit more, and well, it won't be as bottlenecked or reliant on the CPU. So keep that in mind. The next game we did test was Fortnite, and to test that theory, we did run it on max settings, which is not something most people normally do. But on max settings, we got over 140 FPS, which is more than playable. Again, Fortnite is a game you're probably going to be playing on pro settings, and you're going to be getting like 400 plus FPS. But at that point, you're more CPU dependent. So it would have just been more of a benchmark on the 3800X. So in this system, didn't really feel like testing it on that. But on max settings, it does look really good. You can enable ray tracing if you want, but I didn't use any ray tracing benchmarks because, well, I don't really consider ray tracing to be that important of a feature. If it's something that's important to you, then maybe it'd be worth enabling to lose a few performance numbers here and there. But for the sake of me trying to get the best possible numbers with this PC, I decided to disable it. Next up is Doom Eternal, and on Ultra Nightmare settings, we get 300 plus FPS, which is more of what I was expecting. This game definitely takes advantage of more of the GPU than the other games have in the past, which are more CPU dependent, so the performance was really awesome. Doom Eternal is a fun game to play. If you have not had the chance to pick this game up, I highly suggest you give it a shot because it is a really awesome game to run around, shoot up some stuff, and just kind of play mindless for a little bit. So highly recommend Doom Eternal if you're interested. And the other AAA title of choice that we like to benchmark is Shadow of the Tomb Raider, and with the built-in benchmark on ultra settings, we got over 130 FPS average. Shadow of the Tomb Raider is our built-in benchmark of choice, and of course, the RTX 3080 can handle pretty much any AAA title out there. It is the second fastest GPU on the market right now compared to the RTX 3090, but really, you really don't need much more than this. If you're somebody getting the PC gaming and you're willing to spend this kind of money, the RTX 3080 is the go-to card, but the problem is just being able to get it. I know I'm kind of saying this over and over again in all our benchmark runs, but sadly, most of the builds that we do that are high-end, it's really hard to obtain these cards. So overall, I'm very happy with this PC build for the money. How about going to bring Jackson back in here to wrap this video up real quick.
Alright guys, so hopefully you were expecting this thing to perform great because that's exactly what it did.
Of course, if you're buying this PC later into 2021 and something like a 5000 series Ryzen CPU is out, you most certainly can swap that for the 3800 XT and probably get even more performance. But this combo does work and works pretty well. We only tested games at 1080p, but this PC can definitely handle 1440p 4K if you wanted to. And given the fact that it is over $2,000, I would sure hope so.
This case looks really cool, but the one complaint that we do have is it is very hard to build in. It's one of those things where honestly, if you have not built at least a few PCs before, I do not recommend using this as your first case. It's kind of like an enthusiast level case. Really, the front's not too bad, but getting the cable management right and all that in the back is just, it's a whole nother level of expertise, and I would say that I did not even scratch the surface of that level.
And of course, that FSP Hydro PTM power supply was more than enough wattage for this PC build. You could go with something like their 850 or 1000 watt like we did here if you want a little bit more headroom, but overall, it's a great power supply to make a really awesome gaming PC. And once again, if you're building a new PC, whether it's this one or any other PC, check the link in the description down below and check out FSP and their power supplies. You will not be disappointed.
So as Matt mentioned, if you want to purchase any of these parts in the description down below, and they are affiliate links, so they do help us out. Also, do not forget to check out our other two YouTube channels and also our twitch.tv/toastybros. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.
And we'll see you at the next one. Goodbye.
And hey guys, on a side note, we just posted some new content on Floatplane, so make sure you subscribe to that.
We talked about some tech questions. We kind of talked about a secret trick to figure out when you have issues with PC stuff, like vibrating noises. We did a little trick over there, so check that video out if you like behind the scenes stuff. Floatplane, links in the description down below. Now we're actually gone. Goodbye.